Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Wow.
It's a big wow.
Yeah. So many people. I can't even believe it.
So many people we love. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah.
Thank you. Marla, pretty. So I would like to introduce my friend by telling you the story of how we met. He reached out to me, I think it was 2016 or 2017.
I slid into your DMs.
Slid into my DMs, as it was, as it happens. And we started by going for walks in Central Park. It was so beautiful. We were basically just tossing ideas and learnings around. And we became fast friends, of course. And in the end, the first book, which was Inward,
Right.
which still plays a role in my life to this day, became the sort of solidification of our friendship. He asked me to do the launch for Inward. Of course, I said yes, I love the book. And that was just the beginning. We are now here with a book that has blown my mind. It's been in like 8 baths already. It's wet and dried and fully dog-eared. But finally, we get to hear your story.
Right.
And for me, that's the best part, but there's a lot of other wisdom in here. I would love for you to share with us a little bit about that, your story of coming here as an immigrant child, what it meant for you to be in Boston, what it meant for you to become an activist in high school. I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah, so going back way back when. So I was born in Ecuador, in Guayaquil. And we lived there until I was about 4 years old. My parents decided that we needed a greater chance at living a better life. And we picked up and moved. First, we moved to New York City, and we lived there for about 2 weeks, but it wasn't a good fit for us, so we then moved to Boston. And while we were there, it was a tremendous struggle. There was a lot of this intensity that was placed onto our family by this situation of poverty that we were in. So thankfully, my mother and father are incredibly hard workers. My mom, she worked cleaning houses at the time. My father worked at a supermarket. And it was a battle that I saw them trying to keep everything afloat. Especially, I remember rents. Like, they were often talking about how they needed to, figure out how they were going to make the rent each month. And that continued, month after month, and I would see that struggle. And I think it embedded a lot of fear and anxiety inside of me. It started stemming in deeply, and then over time, it kept snowballing. But in Boston, I spent a lot of my time, I think a lot of my education was in the world of activism. So I was part of this group called Boston Youth Organizing Project, and I got to see the wonders of what a small group of people can do when they commit themselves to a goal, to literally transforming their material situation in front of them. And I saw that liberation was powerful, like people liberation, us liberating and changing our environment and empowering ourselves. But that never really fixed what was happening in my own mind, right? So I still dealt with the fear, still dealt with the anxiety. And as I got older and went to college, I was sort of taken out of an environment that was, felt like home, that was very diverse. I grew up with friends who were Haitian, friends who were Jamaican, friends who were Dominican, friends who were Irish, just people from all over the world, friends who were Vietnamese. And then I got placed into a school that was fantastic. I really loved the school, but it was very, the school was not very diverse at all. Most people were coming from really wealthy, elite backgrounds, went to elite private schools, and not only was I academically behind, but I just felt like this was a whole new world. And I think that led into just exacerbating all of that anxiety and struggle that I had inside of me.
Which then led to basically habits of numbing.
Yes.
And that lasted for a number of years.
Yes, it lasted up until when I was, I'd say like 20, 23, I think, was rock bottom. So it was the summer of 2011 when I knew that, I was just oblivious to the fact that there was so much running away from pain happening inside of me, where whenever I felt tension, I would do my best to just evade it by just numbing myself with smoking marijuana, doing different drugs, partying constantly, and then it led into one night where I just pushed my body to the edge, and I took it all way too far, and that morning I just couldn't get up off the floor. I was, dripping sweat, and my heart felt like it was going to explode. And in that moment, the first thing I thought about was my parents. I felt like my life was literally slipping, and I could feel myself just being at the very edge. And it was funny because I spoke to a doctor later and described to her what happened, and she was like, "Oh, that sounds like a mild heart attack." And in that moment, I felt like what got me here was lying to myself.
What got you to the point of almost destroying your life was lying to yourself.
Exactly.
What emerged from that is literally the recipe for coming out of that, which is right here, soon to be in your hands. And I want to take us through the recipe because we don't have a whole lot of time.
Sure.
But we start with self-love.
Right.
And this is sort of the foundation of everything else that you'll read in the book. It is so beautifully articulated. May I have your permission to read a little bit?
Yeah, please.
Okay. The shift finally came when I stopped throwing pleasure at the problem and started nourishing myself with non-judgmental and honest attention. The refocusing of my energy into paying attention to all my changing emotions had an immediate effect. So this leads me to want to talk about Vipassana.
Sure.
Vipassana. You started in 2012, so we're coming up on your 10-year anniversary.
Yes, we just passed it. Yeah, July of
So
2012 was
beautiful.
my first course.
The healing. And I would love for you to talk to our audience about what Vipassana is, what it's meant to you, how it's changed your life, because a lot of that self-love and refocusing of your energy has come from that.
Right. And I like to personally define self-love as doing what you need to do to heal yourself or free yourself. And for me, that really looked like not only building positive habits in terms of like just surrounding myself with good people, changing what I put into my body, but I knew that I needed some type of method. And my friend Sam, who's sitting up here, he did his first silent 10-day course, I think about 6 months before I did mine. And he wrote a few of our friends, me, Josh, and Jared, he wrote us an email, and Shin, he wrote us an email all about love, compassion, and goodwill. Oh. And it was so funny because like I had never heard Sam talk about this before. I was like, what is going on with this guy? Like what? and I was so shocked by it because, we used to just party hard together. We would focus our time around having fun. But when I heard that coming from him, I was like, I need some of that too. Like whatever he got, I need that too. So I signed up for a course, and it's Vipassana is basically, it means to see reality as it is. It's a very old teaching. It originates from the Buddhist teaching. So it's been around for 2,600 years. And we practice in a Burmese tradition, so it's quite rigorous. We go away to these silent 10-day courses where you learn to, you calm down your mind by observing the natural breath for 3 days, and then once the mind is settled, calm and concentrated, you then move on to Vipassana, where you start observing the truth of reality within the framework of the body. And what that really brings you into contact with is primarily the truth of impermanence first. So you start learning that not only at the intellectual level, because we all understand that to a certain degree that everything's changing, but to experience that everything's changing, to literally feel your body changing, that opens the door to so much wisdom and to so much deconditioning. And I think that's what the gift that Vipassana really gave me was that, and not only was it giving me this like way to let go, but it was just opening a door to a whole new life for me.
And watching yourself as you sit, let's say 6 hours a day, 5, 6 hours a day, I've had that experience. And watching yourself as, I just want to put a highlighter on what you've just said, watching yourself as your brain changes, as your body changes, as your body temperature changes, as your heart rate changes, and you just aren't moving.
Yeah.
It does teach you something. What you just said really opened a little bit of a door for me. Thank you. Page 16, this is a really important part of the book. The understanding of self-love makes the most sense to me, you write, is much more internal. It's the way you relate to yourself with compassion, honesty, and openness. It is meeting every part of yourself with unconditional acceptance, from the parts that you find easy to love to the rough and imperfect parts from which you try to hide. Self-love begins with acceptance, but it doesn't stop there. Real self-love is a total embrace of all that you are, while simultaneously acknowledging that you have room to grow and much to let go of. You, at various different intervals, I basically went through the book and just took notes on other definitions of self-love,
Sure.
which I like to do. A vehicle we use to travel through our internal universe. Relate to yourself with compassion, honesty, openness, acceptance, and acknowledgement that you have room to grow. And you also defined it as an invitation to your inner world. Self-love. And that's the basis of the book. There are 3 pillars of self-love that he talks about throughout the book, and I think you'll really find it useful. You're definitely going to want to buy it for friends. The 3 pillars are radical honesty, building positive habits,
And self-acceptance.
self-acceptance. And I would like to break those 3 down because I think radical honesty is so important for us. And I don't think I ever really understood what it was until I read this.
Yeah, it's funny, right? Radical honesty is a term that I think people can take it in their own way, define it how they like. And when I think about it myself, it is you being as honest as possible with yourself. And it doesn't really have to do with other people. It's about you and yourself. So what I found, right, in that moment where I almost lost my life and I'm there rock bottom, how did I get myself there? By lying. I did not want to admit that I didn't feel good. Like, that was my fear, was like, I don't feel good. Like, there's a problem here, and I need to figure out how to solve it. I didn't want to admit that there was a problem. So what I found was that when I picked myself up, I had a number of delicate days after that, where, like, if I did too much, my heart would just feel like it would start exploding again. But I challenged myself. I was like, okay, so what you would do before was at the moment that you would feel sadness or tension or some sort of mental turbulence or another, when you would feel that, sit with yourself, just be with it. Like, just, even though it feels ugly, even though it feels tough, just be with that. And that's what radical honesty looked like for me, was like, let me just admit what's happening, let me tell myself the truth when I'm trying to run away from what's actually happening in my life. So that radical honesty showed me that all of my friendships and my relationships with my wife, with my family members, they were superficial. Like, they weren't that deep. They were very lightly tethered. And that because I didn't know myself, I couldn't deeply engage with other people. And, in those moments when I would sit with myself, and this is before I started meditating, I started realizing that, like, I have to put work into my relationships if I want to actually, like, see them flourish in the way that I know they can. Yeah.
You also talk about radical honesty as, and I think this is important for all of us to hear, not about punishing yourself, not about harsh self-talk,
Right.
Please. It's about being calmly, as you say, in constant contact with your truth. And I think the main part of what you've just said is the part about knowing that something is off and not being afraid to cop to the fact that something is off and just figuring it out.
Right.
Slowly and steadily.
Yeah, self-awareness turns you into a detective.
Which leads to my next question about curiosity.
Yeah.
We're now on page 21. Curiosity can also help us trace a clear trajectory to our transformation. As we change and shed old layers, we will have to get to know ourselves again and again by periodically asking ourselves, what are my real aspirations now? And again, now. What are my real aspirations? And this sort of flexibility that you invite us to with who we are in any given moment that is constantly in flux is such good wisdom. And it's reflective of such an old man. And you're 30-something.
Yeah.
Like, gosh.
Yeah, I don't even know.
I think it's just the hours. I think you put in the hours. You talk about this later too. You put in the hours with yourself.
Yeah, I've meditated a lot.
And
yeah.
and it yields. But the hours matter. The effort matters.
They do, and it's funny because I think about, so like I'm really fortunate so I live in Western Mass, my wife and I. We lived in New York City for about 7 years, and now we live not too far from the Vipassana center that we often go to. And when I'm there, and we have so many friends who are in their 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s, and it's so interesting being around a group of people where like one time I did a really rough calculation of how many hours I've meditated, and it was like about 8,000 hours. And it's not even impressive, right? Like then I thought about like my friend Craig, and I'm like, Craig easily has meditated 40,000 hours. Or like the teacher that I look up to, Barry Lapping, this guy's probably meditated like 60,000 hours. Like he's in his mid-70s, and he's been meditating hard since he was like 22. And I'm like, dang,
meditating hard.
I
love it. Second pillar of self-love, positive habit building. And I think this played a huge role in your healing.
Yeah.
And I just want to jump in for 2 seconds. Radical honesty leads to positive habit building, and it's a long-term game. Can you talk about how you worked with that?
Yeah, I think positive habit building, so when that really stems from that moment when I decided, okay, no more hard drugs, no more drugs that would like really give me the chance of losing my life quickly. I realized that I was incredibly unhealthy. Like I was so like unhealthy in my body, not just my mind. And I knew that I had to like slowly walk back into health. So not only did I start putting more nourishing food into my body, but I started going for walks. I signed up to the gym. I started just like changing the way that I sort of shaped my life, around like sitting and watching too much TV. And it was like, okay, I need to be more active. But that positive habit building, like it's still ongoing. It's still like I still see places in my life where, like I focus on different goals, and I'll take on a particular goal and focus on it for like a year. So like, I remember when I really wanted to sit for 2 hours a day, I really focused on that for like a whole like 2 years, trying to get down this habit. And then I moved on and started, just focusing on other aspects. And now these days it's focusing even more on my health, because I feel like, as I don't know how long I'll live, but as long as I live, I like to be strong and healthy.
Life, yes. One clarification for the sake of the audience.
Sure.
2 hours consecutively?
I meditate an hour in the morning and an hour in the evening. And that's, and it sounds like a lot. Like often people, they hear that and it's a lot, and it is a lot. But it's an investment. It's an investment I make in myself. And I know that this investment yields powerful results. And, I don't meditate to be a writer. Like I meditate to continue taking steps forward on the path of liberation. And this is a path that has an unforeseen time limit. Like you don't know when you're going to be fully liberated. You don't know when you're going to, fully come out of suffering. But it feels so important and integral to my life. Like this, because I meditate, that's why I can have a better relationship with my mom and dad. That's why my relationship with my wife is better than it's ever been. And it feels really important to keep doing that.
I want to touch on the third pillar, and then I want to go into relationships because I feel that strongly. Third pillar, self-acceptance.
Yes.
This is a very slippery concept for most of us, and we can catch glimpses of it when things are going really well. But it's harder when things are not going well. It's hard to accept ourselves when things are tough. And I'd love to hear what you've discovered in these hours with yourself.
It's interesting, right? Self-acceptance feels like a critical thing that we need to cultivate if we really want to learn how to let go. And that may seem, right, like counterintuitive a bit, but if you really think about what letting go is, it's accepting what's happening, what is happening in this moment. Because oftentimes we're battling with whatever is the tension that's arising in our mind. And when you start turning your attention inward, all you can really take as your ammunition to go into this sort of like internal battle is self-acceptance, because there are going to be a lot of things that you find that you like and a lot of things that you don't like, because we all have such deep and diverse emotional histories. So when you go in there, arming yourself with self-acceptance, letting that be your shield, letting that be your way of embracing yourself, actually sets you up for the letting go that's going to make your mind lighter.
Not enlightened, but lighter.
Right.
Self-love and healing are deeply intertwined, and if you take at least one of them seriously, the other will be immediately activated. They rise and fall together, self-love and healing. Similarly, if the two are flourishing, a profound transformation is bound to take place. I would love to point out to the audience, too, you guys, that at the end of each chapter, there are several questions that will actually blow your mind and might lead you to write your own book of your own. So do note that the last page of each chapter is all about these beautiful questions. I'm going to give you one. What does self-love look like for you right now? How do you want your self-love to evolve? What would you like it to feel like in a year from now? Like, how nice. Nobody has asked me that question lately. Nobody. So let's go into healing. This is a very packed chapter. When you talk about healing, we're not talking about, I think, the sort of typical understanding of healing. It's much more deep than that. You talk about how the mind is extremely malleable.
Yes.
And that intentional, introspective action alleviates suffering. That's sort of, for me, what I took away as the foundation of healing. Mm-hmm. I would love to hear how that is playing out for you now.
Yeah, so like for me personally, when I think about healing, you know it's real when the intensity of your reaction is decreasing. And that's really it. That's the point of trouble that we feel in our minds, right? Some situation or another may occur, but are we reacting to it with the same fire as before? Is that same intense sort of, either anxiety or sadness or anger or whatever you're disposed to, is that coming out with the same ferocity as it used to, right? So when you start either doing therapy or journaling or meditating or whatever it is that, your preferred tool is, you'll start seeing the results in those difficult moments. Because it's one thing, it's quite simple to be calm in easy times. Quite simple to be equanimous when things are okay, but what about when something difficult happens, when there's loss, when there's heartache, when there's some sort of challenge that you didn't want to face, but it's there, it's in front of you, and you can't avoid it. In those moments, that's when you can really see and measure, how much has your reaction relaxed.
Letting go, page 60. Let go more than once. Let go when an old pattern wants to drag you back into the past. Let go when narratives run wild in your mind. Let go every time you try to cause yourself extra trouble. There is healing in repetition, and soon peace will feel familiar.
You got to do it over and over again. It's just what it is.
Over and over. Damn it. Letting go, you say, 61. Letting go is essentially a profound acceptance of the present moment.
Right.
This is the core of Buddhist teachings.
Right.
This profound acceptance of the present moment leads us to a sense of clarity and sort of forthrightness with ourselves that allows us to make a good choice going forward.
And this is something that I like to highlight, right? Like I was just like on the car up here, I was tweeting that when you're thinking way too much about the past, remind yourself, remember that healing happens in the present moment. And this is something that is, it's quite interesting because we're in this explosion of all these different tools right now. And I see a lot of sort of, fantastic therapists who are talking about the dynamics that we experience in our childhood and how that manifests in your relationships, how that manifests in, the way that you connect with different people as an adult. But one thing that I find is that people sometimes confuse healing as something that is very intellectual. It's not really about remembering and sort of bringing back those trauma points that may have occurred to you, because it's one thing to, see them again in your mind, but it's another thing to understand how to build a different relationship with the emotions that come up when these thoughts and memories come back, right? So these are two different things. So it's one thing to intellectualize, it's a whole other thing to know how to feel in a manner that doesn't weigh you down. And I think a lot of healing actually happens not just through feeling, but it happens in the present moment. And think about that. Love, joy, compassion, letting go, all these things are happening in the present moment. So it is good. It's very good to understand your past and where you're coming from and what's affected you, but don't get so caught up in it, because that ultimately, if you want to learn how to heal, it's how can I be present with the emotions that are moving up and down within me right now. Yeah.
Page 85. If the pain was deep, you will have to let it go many times.
Yeah. I know. It's tough. I wish it was easier, but it's not easier.
All right, bye. Reactions accrue. I wrote a note to myself. Reactions accrue, but meditation and moments of calm also accrue.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is the good news. And I think this is why, I've heard people say, well, how does he have such a positive... I was with a lady on the plane last night, sat down next to her, and I said, here, take this. Just check it out for a little while. I've made some dog ears and some notes, but I think you'll really like it. And she's like, I know who young Pueblo is. And I was like, amazing. She ended up taking all the notes that I had made, meticulous notes, taking them, putting them in her little pouch, and I proceeded to leave them on the plane. I had to let go of that many times. At least 3 times. But I think this is, she and I had a conversation about the title. She was like, what does it mean, lighter, though? And I was like, well, really it's about your brain and your sort of mental density, and less so about your body or anything like that. And she said, oh, okay. And then I said, go to page 87. I've now memorized this book because I've done it 3 times. Setting the record straight. A common fear is that letting go might make you passive. And this is where we're going to lead into relationships. The heavy mental weight that you carry consumes a lot of your energy. Resisting, suppressing, or fighting your emotions on a regular basis quietly eats up your reserves. Living in a constant battle and treating yourself like an enemy pushes you far away from living at your most optimal level. Any mental tension will automatically consume energy. And when the added tension is removed, you'll feel a new vibrancy for life. So this is what we're talking about when we talk about lighter.
Right.
You go on to say that letting go actually sharpens your mind by cleansing your perception. When I sat in silence, I made it 6 days. What I noticed is that every time I would be meditating and I would go off into some la-la land and my eyes would close and my head would droop and it was a whole thing, I would come back and I found my mind felt brighter and sharper. I would love to hear your experience of that.
Yeah, it's funny because I think a lot of times when people go into meditation specifically, their main complaint is like, I can't meditate because I can't focus, or I can't meditate because my mind is just thinking about all these different things. Well, that's how everyone enters into meditation. That's really how it is for those who are beginning and for a lot of people who've been meditating for 30 years. But it's not about getting it really perfect. It's about being open to trying again and trying again. And that's why a critical part of the Eightfold Noble Path is right effort, right? So that doesn't mean precision, perfection. It means that you are repeatedly trying again, and over time, what that does is you're strengthening mental qualities. You're strengthening the quality of awareness. You're strengthening the quality of compassion, the quality of equanimity, and so many other, things that we really need in our lives. And I feel like when I think about meditating now, it's just a mental gym. You're going to a mental gym. You know, you're literally taking yourself and you're like, oh, I had the quality of awareness my whole life, but it was very weak. And now I'm going to make it stronger. And same thing with equanimity and all these other things that we need in our lives.
Which leads us really nicely into relationships.
Yeah.
I see you and Sarah. I am uplifted. I feel like I was just saying this, I feel like the proud big sister.
Yeah.
It's very inspiring to see how you treat each other. In the school where I'm studying, Upaya, we learned that the teacher sort of points the way by how they act. They don't necessarily speak it. You guys are an example of that when it comes to relationships. How you treat each other in the smallest moments, it just brings a tear to my eye. I would like to learn from you about what it is that you two prioritize in your time together in order to make this so.
Yeah, I mean, we've come a long way, you know. And like my friends who, you know, who we all went to college with, like they know. Yeah, I think Sarah and I, we got together when she was 18 and I was 19, so we've been together for about 15 years. And we've been married for 7 years. And the first sort of 6 years of our relationship was utter chaos. It was just, you know, this constant finger pointing where we were both trying to win. It's like, your fault, your fault, your fault, but never like any self-examination on our parts. And it was tough. You know, there were a lot of times where we didn't make it. There were even times where we actually broke up and then got back together because like our connection was just so strong, but we didn't know how to hold that connection. That connection was just, it was just there, but there was no emotional maturity for us to cultivate it, for us to build a home around it. And it wasn't until we started meditating where like ever so slowly harmony started coming into our lives. And we started realizing that, oh, I'm trying to make this tiredness and this sort of anger inside of me your fault when actually you didn't do anything. You know, this is actually happening inside of me, and it's actually because I didn't get enough sleep last night, but somehow my brain wants to go back to 3 months before and somehow say this is your fault, you know? And when we start being aware of ourselves, when we start paying attention to our minds, we see how we just build these illogical narratives where we're like jumping through hoops. And granted, right, there are definitely some times when like I misspeak and say something that I then apologize for because I'm like, oh, whoa, I stepped out of line, or vice versa. But I would say like 80% of the time, it has nothing to do with each other. It's really just like how I feel. So what we practice is not only like, you know, meditating daily. Like Sarah's also like a hardcore meditator. She also meditates like 45 days as I do. And yeah, we've been on this journey together for 10 years now. But outside of meditating every day to build our self-awareness and our sort of general calmness and equanimity, we practice sort of preventative communication, is what I've been calling it, where we will just let each other know how we feel off the bat a few times a day. Like when we wake up, I let her know, I feel pretty good today. Or, you know, she lets me know, you know, I don't feel great. Like I feel how, like my temper's short. And I'm like, great, thank you for letting me know. So now I know, like, and I know, and
I'll be
she
over
knows.
here.
Exactly. So I can give her her space, or I can just support her in the ways that she needs in that moment. And it's funny because in those moments, I can't really help her with her emotions, but what I can do is sort of make the situation around her easier. So if she was going to go to the mail, or she was going to go take out the trash that day, I'll do it. If she was going to cook, I'll do it. So that way we take turns supporting each other. And if we both don't feel good, then we just know that we have to walk gently that day, because so easily the mind will look for some type of material to just gather ammunition and keep that fire burning that's already in there. So meditate and preventative communication. Let each other know how you feel in your emotional spectrum, whether you feel good or whether you don't feel good. Just let each other know, and that sets you both up for less fighting.
I'll just leave that there for a moment. Signs of emotional maturity, page 126. You don't need to jump into every argument or give your opinion on every matter. Thanks. Sometimes you do need to speak up in self-defense or to reaffirm boundaries, but saying less can make what you stand for much more clear. And it will save your energy from moments when you know your words will have a great impact. That's a real good sign of emotional maturity.
Yeah.
The section on choosing your practice, I need to back up just for a second because it's something I really wanted to talk about.
You're the boss here. Yeah.
I'm not really the boss. Jonah started calling me boss lady. Boss lady. How do you know when your practice is the one for you?
Oh, that's a great question. It's funny because when we started meditating, we weren't just meditating. We were like, checking different things out. We were, had a bit of an interest in energy healing at the time, and we were checking out different types of meditations, and we just kept coming back to Vipassana because I found that when I sat a 10-day course, I would come out of it and be like, what? Like, what? Like, how is this? Like, not only how do I feel so much better, but how am I continuously learning so much? I described it to my friends the first 10-day course that I did. It really felt like I learned more in 10 days than in 4 years of college. Like, it felt so substantial in that manner. And when I keep going back, it's still like that. Like, I still feel like I'm learning so much. And it's hard. Like, it doesn't really get too much easier. Like, when you go in there, you're silent for 10 days, you're meditating for, 10, 11 hours a day, and it's hard. It's hard work. But I keep putting myself through that process because the benefits are massive. And how can I not, treat myself well? How can I not give that to myself?
Can you just tell our audience about how to find Vipassana?
Oh, sure. I'm talking about it so much. There are a lot of different Vipassana traditions, a lot of good ones. The one that I specifically go to, it's in the S.N. Goenka tradition, taught by this...
S.N. Goenka, Goenka.
Yes, and he was taught by this incredible person who I've never met, but I've always felt such an affinity towards, Sayaji Uba Khin. He was like a titan amongst human beings, just a tremendous person. And you can go to dhamma.org, DHAMMA.org.
So let's move on to relationships.
Sure.
Okay, for real. Your healing elevates the relationship. Your healing elevates the relationship. Your healing elevates the relationship. Even if the connection is strong, there still needs to be plenty of intentional time for the both of you to learn each other's preferences, as well as get a good sense of how your emotional history and traumas and aspirations affect the way you both show up in your relationship. Even when the love between you flows easily, there will still be hurdles to overcome. Mm-hmm. Love opens the door to vulnerability, which will allow more of each of you to come to the surface. And the welcoming of this vulnerability sheds further light on the patterns you each carry, the fears you're working on overcoming, the deep hurt that each of you have unconsciously carried throughout your lives. This is a big job to run a relationship that has that kind of communication in it.
It is. It's a big job, but how else are you going to love? I think it takes a lot of work. And we're combating this survival tendency that forms ego, right? Like, I've been thinking a lot about how the mind, it's geared towards survival. And that makes sense evolutionarily, right? Like, the mind really cares about you getting to tomorrow, but it doesn't care about how happy you are, and doesn't care about how self-fulfilled, how peaceful you are. And we live in a different time. We live in a time where civilization has made it so where we even have the opportunity for happiness, right? And that's still out of balance, right? We can give more people the opportunity for happiness, but that makes it so that if we try to continue living with survivalist tendencies that really just keep feeding the ego, we'll be unsuccessful at building happiness. So our only other alternative is compassion, to live from compassion as opposed to ego.
And this is where we get into the challenges to healing section. I mean, I'm sort of skipping over a few things, but that section really, chapter 8. Undoing the old and practicing the new is messy. Inner tension pushes us to fight. We try and measure our healing progress all the time. But it isn't linear. It takes courage to look inward, and it takes courage to practice compassion in real time. I would like to hear how, and I'm sure our audience would too, how do you practice compassion in real time?
I mean, for me personally, it often looks like slowing down. When I feel knotted up inside, I am producing this knotted up energy. and in those moments, if I'm like writing or doing whatnot, if I can, I try to minimize the amount of tasks that I have to do for that day, and I just try to slow down. You know, I try to get a little less done, and I try to focus on being gentle towards myself and much more nourishing, as opposed to just, you know, hitting things off of the list. And it looks different for different people. I mean, compassion can take a lot of forms. It can look like standing up for yourself. Yeah.
When you practice compassion for other people, you talk a lot about listening selflessly, and that's one of the basic, you know, fundamental tenets of Buddhism. I'm going to just read one of your prompts, page 182. How is your practice of listening selflessly going? Can you focus on the other person's words without immediately thinking about how you will respond? Oh, thank you. Awesome. We have questions from you. I'm so excited. Talk to us just before we get into the questions about listening selflessly. What does that look like to you?
I think it's the foundation of how to allow conflict to happen within a more harmonious incubator. Listening selflessly, it's how you build understanding. And that's one thing that Sarah and I, we obviously haven't perfected, but we're trying to practice between the two of us, is that when we have a disagreement, when tension arises between us, what we try to do is we stop trying to win, because that's what we used to do. And winning, just trying to win, made the fight last longer. Or if one of us did win, what actually happened was domination, right? It was you making the other person lose, and you making the other person sort of fit your worldview. And granted, there may be times where one person is right and one person is wrong, but when disagreement arises, you're better off trying to build understanding. So we take turns listening selflessly to each other. How do you feel? How did what happened make these emotions arise inside of you? Like, well, how do you want to move forward? And then, you know, I do my best to listen to her, and then I share my view as well. And when we both really understand each other and where we're coming from, it's so much easier to just let it go. Be like, okay, it's done. Let's treat each other well now. Yeah.
That moment of deciding that we're done here.
Yeah.
And just saying, okay, let's move on.
Yeah.
It's very hard for two people to arrive at that at the same time.
Yeah.
Let's bring it to one of the questions.
Sure.
If our relationships are reactive, there's an S at the end of relationships. If our relationships are reactive, is that incompatibility, or are we not doing the work?
So this is one of the reasons why I stay out of my own DMs, right? So I can talk about relationships in a lot of different ways, but ultimately what is happening to you is highly situational, highly complex. There are many different factors that are arising in that moment. So I don't know if you should break up with your boyfriend or not. Like, I don't, you know? And, you know, it's just, yeah, there's a lot of factors to it. So I think...
But if you do read the book, you'll start to see that anyway, let's talk about me. My reactivity is mine.
Right.
And I have to see where I have donated a great deal of my own reactivity to this relationship.
Yes, thank you. So this is something that's critical to understand. Like, if you want to reclaim your own power, and I hope you do, because it's going to make your life a lot better, you're going to find that a lot of your power actually is not in other people. You're actually giving your power away to your own past. And that power of yours, right, when difficult situations arise in front of you, ultimately what's happening is it's your own perception and your own reaction that's causing the difficulty in your mind. So when someone's coming at you, when someone's doing something to you, it's your perception and your reaction that's causing that tension in your mind. So yes, it's good to make sure that people who cause difficulty in your life are no longer in your life, or people who have, who are abusing you or anything like that. Of course, yes, they should not be in your life. But at the end of the day, you should also understand that your troubles are happening up here, right? So if you keep reliving that moment over and over and you don't quite know how to process those emotions when they come up, then there's a need for a tool. There's a need for a tool for you to learn how to process that.
A really nice question about recreating family in the presence of divorce. Person has 2 kids, sad, we're not a family of 4. What are your words of wisdom on recreating family while navigating that time?
That's really powerful. I think I've seen a lot of difficulties like that happen in front of me with friends and family, and I think in the situations where it's gone well, the parents, they decide that no matter what, no matter how much distaste they have for each other, they put the kids first. And they will find ways to communicate with each other in a manner where the well-being of their child comes first, and they can continue moving forward. And sometimes, and obviously it's probably going to take time to heal and whatnot, but eventually, you can start creating situations where you can have Thanksgivings together and whatnot. But I think it's quite difficult, because if there's no healing in the individual happening, then they're always going to see an enemy in front of them, when really there's no enemy, right? There's just a situation that didn't work, that was harmful, that was ugly, but ultimately you still have these beings that you have to take responsibility for.
Which leads to a really sweet question. How has your relationship with your parents shaped you, and how has it evolved?
That's so nice. I was wondering if you can indulge me for a second. Mami and Papi, can you please stand up? These are my parents. Thank you so much. That's what I was dreaming of. It was like if I got one thing today, that's what I was hoping for, was that my parents could stand up, because honestly, like they're everything. Like the gamble that they made, to even come to this country. And let me tell you, it doesn't always work out. Like, I grew up in the inner city. I went to a high school where if you were Latino, you had a 50% chance of graduating, right? And that's not just my high school. That was Boston Public Schools. So think about that. If you went into high school, half of you didn't make it. Like, that's incredible. That's incredibly difficult. And a lot of those people, the vast majority of them, were first-generation Americans. So my family was really fortunate. And I think a lot of that is due to, like, we were super, super poor, and we were stuck in that poverty trap, but my parents had good morals. And I got to see them give when they had very, very little. And that always touched me. That always felt really just so momentous, that they would still find ways to give when they really had nothing. But now my relationship with my parents is, I feel like I'm trying to really enjoy it as much as possible, because we're all like, our family's grown up. Like, I'm 34. Like, my parents are also older, and I feel like we have this beautiful time together. And when I'm with them, I'm like, let me be with them. Like, I'm really trying to pay attention. I'm really not trying to be on my phone. Like, I'm really trying to, listen as best as I can. And I see myself not do that well, but I keep trying again, So I just feel so fortunate, to be really honest. Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
How would you recommend balancing your mental mindset and your work mindset, or better said, not letting the stresses of your job come home with you?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it's quite tricky. You know, I think we have to be mindful that, like even Elena was talking about it today. Like this was such a beautiful observation. She, you know, used to live in New York City for so many years and has recently not lived in the city, but when she came back, she found herself moving at a New York City pace. Like everyone's just walking. And my wife said the same thing to me 2 days ago. She's like, "Why are you walking so fast?" And I'm like, "'Cause it's New York. Like you gotta walk fast." And one of the observations that Elena made was, I think part of it has to do with the fact that there are cars everywhere, and the cars are setting the pace, and it's
versus the trees.
Yeah, right, exactly. And I think that happens at a macro level in the world, where like capitalism moves at this incredibly fast rate. We're constantly focused on production, and I think that creates a level of sickness. Like I think it is harmful for us, the amount of information that we're taking in, the amount that we're trying to produce. We're constantly trying to overwork ourselves to prove our worth, right? To prove how valuable we are to our companies. And I think what I'm finding is a lot more people, like even my sister was talking about this earlier. And I was so proud. I was like, this is amazing. She's, talking about how her company is making these poor decisions, and then they want her to do all this work for free. And she's like, I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna work my hours, but I'm not gonna just do all this stuff for you for free. If you pay me, it's different. But, and I was like, great, because, sometimes we just put too much of our personal value in our production, and I think that's really harmful.
Yeah. Which leads to a great question on creativity. How can you become unstuck? How can one become unstuck and remove blockage to make room for creativity and courage? And you got a special little drawing. Thank you for inspiring and spreading hope.
Oh, thank you.
That's a keeper.
Really nice. Yeah. Thank you, Em.
Yeah. So I'll just let you know, the asker of this question, chapter 9, internal changes ripple outward. To be able to see and live with a fresh mind that is no longer in survival mode is a gift that we can only give ourselves. Page 207. And it leads into a section on creativity, which is really the result of present moment awareness. So if I may, to answer this question.
Please.
Please.
You're the more creative one.
No, but from your words.
Yeah.
The more I meditate, the more I sit, the more I listen, the more I devote myself to just being present.
Yeah.
The more creativity just comes through me like waves. And courage is present in those moments.
Mm-hmm. I think the only, I'm really honest with you, I had no idea that I was even interested in writing until I started meditating. That my mind was so heavy throughout my teenage years and my college years that it wasn't until my third silent 10-day course where, enough was sort of alleviated that I was like, I want to write. Where is this coming from? But I want to write. And I think that really happens to a lot of people. And I have friends who are meditators, who are musicians, friends who are doctors, and friends who are just all over the spectrum with their jobs, but they do find more creativity flowing into their lives, and creativity in the sense of looking at an old problem and being able to think about it in new ways. Yeah. And they just allow that to flow out from them, and it's beautiful, and it stems from their personal transformation.
And I'll complete that thought by repeating something that you've said, which is a mind that is relaxed is open to insight.
Yeah, yeah.
What message do you have to the young people these days when they are struggling so hard to just accept themselves?
It's tough. I think young people today have this immense battle because everyone is fighting for their attention, right? These companies. These companies that are billion-dollar companies. They've created these massive algorithms that are tricking you into just feeding your craving. And I've seen this happen before. You know, I've seen this like even with my nieces, right? When they're like on TikTok way too much, or they're just like on their phones so much, and it's hard to accept yourself when you're constantly being fed other things that you think you should be. And I think it's one of the most dangerous things that we face. And that's one of the reasons, like, you know, to bring up, like, that's why myself, Jack Kornfield, Bradley Horowitz, he's the person who developed Gmail, and my friend Soren, who developed Wisdom 2.0, and our friend Ruchika, who was the head of well-being and learning at Google, we created a venture capital company called Wisdom Ventures. And this company, our purpose is to basically gather funds from investors, but focus on giving those funds, investing in companies that are intentionally building their products in a compassionate manner. Their products in a manner where they are literally designing what they're creating with the well-being of the user in mind. So this doesn't necessarily mean just like wellness companies. We're trying to find new social media companies. We're trying to find, hopefully, like a much more compassionate Amazon. We're talking like to really just recreate this last decade of the internet and create a more compassionate internet that we don't quite yet have, because we're being taken advantage of. And it is really, really dangerous the way these billions of dollars have been pointed at our brains. And we think we still have the power when really they're telling us what to buy, what to think, what to feel, and it's harmful.
Two more questions.
Sure.
In your opinion, how does music or art change the world?
Oh, I love this. I mean, art is everything. My friend Shin likes to say, culture changes before laws change. And that change is shifted by art. Artists are always like historically known as like the forefront of the revolution. And when I think about it in terms of my own like personal, like whenever I get stuck in writing, or I feel like, you know, I'm not like saying things in a way that really fit the puzzle, I'll turn on music really loudly, and not like any type of music. I'll like I have this one playlist called Amsterdam, and I don't know why I called it that.
Is it public?
It is public.
Did you name it that because of marijuana?
No, not because of marijuana. This came after that. But it has, it's really just a lot of like modern classical music, like super moody music with no words. And I love to listen to it, and oftentimes I'm writing to it, and I feel like I'm like putting together like an orchestra or something. And it's so helpful, but I feel like in terms of creativity, music has been one of my greatest allies, and that's what helps feed the lyrical quality of my writing.
Yes. So the last question, and then there's one sort of final. Thank you for your wisdom. First of all, I start my days with your words. What is your advice on detaching what you want for your life and acceptance of your present life?
That's like that. That's like the wise question. That's like key. That's key wisdom right there. The people that I look up to, the people who I bring my questions to regarding the teachings of the Buddha, regarding the path of liberation, the thing that they are constantly practicing is surrendering to this moment, to the moment that's happening right now. And it's funny how the mind plays tricks on us. And I was talking to this meditation teacher who I really look up to, and I was like telling him about how, you know, my meditation, like it wasn't going in a particular direction like how it used to. And he was like, no. He's like, no, Diego. He's like, like the past is done. You just need to observe what's happening right now. Stop trying to change what's happening right now. Just be with it, observe it. And that's, you know, in terms of meditation, but it feels like in our lives, it's good to have aspirations. Like, it's good. Like, there's, we create families, we create civilization out of our aspirations. And I think there was this sort of mistranslation of the Buddhist teaching when it first came to the West, where they said desire is the root of suffering. Like, that was wrong. It was not right. It's craving. Craving is the root of suffering. Craving is very different from desire. Craving is wrapped in tension. Craving is what creates attachment, what creates this mental tension in your mind. Whereas desire can also be understood as a goal, right? The Buddha had a goal to become fully liberated. It was a goal. He acted on this goal. But you knew that it was a goal because when he didn't achieve it, and he didn't achieve it many, many times before he actually did, he would go back to the drawing board. He would re-strategize. He would ask himself, what was I doing wrong? What can I do better to keep moving forward? And he would calmly do that, as opposed to, not achieving enlightenment and then wailing and crying and being so upset. So I think that's something we can take into our daily lives. Like, have your aspirations, but at the same time, notice that your fastest way to your aspirations is by, from moment to moment, just accepting what is happening right now.
And the final question, if I wanted to recommend your books, what would you like me to say to someone that is hurting or having struggles with loving themselves? And I would say, and then I want you to answer too, I'm such a connoisseur of his work. I would say if the person is a poet, send them to inward and clarity and connection and just let them dive in page by page in sort of an oracle style. But if they really want the recipe for how to lighten the mind and release the struggles and the pain, this is the one. Your thoughts?
Yeah, and this is in regards to what I've written, or just in general?
Yeah, the question is, if I wanted to recommend your books.
I would recommend them in a manner where it's like, this has really inspired me, like saying personally to them, like, this is what's really been, a source of inspiration for me personally, because I think oftentimes, like, I get these questions often, it's like, how do I change so-and-so, right? Like, how do I change this person? And it's like, you're it's not quite right. You're not going to be able to just like change, because I got one the other day where it was like, how do I make that person heal themselves? And it all goes back to Lao Tzu, right? Like, you have to live it. Like, you have to show the changes within your own life, your own transformation. And then that may inspire other people, potentially. It may not be for them, right? You have no control but over other people, but you do have control in terms of just representing that new life that you're living. And whether it's my work or Elena's work or whomever's, like, there's just so much out there for people, and I really believe that. Like, if I leave you with anything, like, I really truly believe that this moment in time that we live in, there's a healing generation that's emerging, and I think it's historically unprecedented. I think it's it's something that hasn't happened before. And you look back on all these different time periods where people have tried to, come around a common cause and build a better world. And what happens a lot is that oftentimes the people who are trying to create a better world, they do gain power, and then they end up recreating the same thing that they were once fighting against. And I think a lot of that is due to the fact that there's not enough healing. There's not enough self-love. You've never quite dealt with the roots of craving and aversion in your mind. And what happens with power? Power is a magnet, and it functions like a magnet on the ego, and it will pull out the roughest parts of it. So we have to be careful with power. And the way to treat power really carefully is by doing your best to decondition the mind, to not carry so much heaviness, to increase that self-love, because self-love is the thing that opens the door to unconditional love to all people. So think about it. If my self-love increases, I'm going to be less and less interested in harming you. And I think that's going to be something that is really going to be a critical catalyst for the world, because now people are healing themselves in so many different ways with Western modalities, Eastern modalities, indigenous modalities. You just have to find what works for you and give it time, give it effort. But that's what gives me hope.
Diego Perez.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.